Welcome, everybody. Welcome on this gorgeous, beautiful fall day here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I am thrilled with this weather and close to the 80s so far, and I'm from Michigan, so right now it's probably in the 40s there. So I'm thoroughly enjoying this. I'm Dawn Johnson. I am the Vice President of Partnership Services here at the Bowling Green Chamber, and I am want to thank you all for joining us for today's Business at its Best with the topic of defeating an unconscious bias. I look forward to getting to know all of you, and someday hopefully we will be able to get to resume our semi-normalcy and where we can meet in person. But for now, we are embracing this virtual event, and very glad you all are joining us. We also have some housekeeping that we want to talk about today. Today's session is being recorded, so please keep your mics on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have questions, you can submit those via the chat window. And at the end, we will be actually having a Q&A portion, so you can ask your questions throughout the seminar, or you could do it at the very end. It's up to you, and then Terry will answer them as they come in. Before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsor, Graves Gilbert Clinic. They are our title sponsor for Business at its Best, and they have a short message for us.
At Graves Gilbert Clinic, their top priority is the health and safety of their patients, employees, and visitors. And because of that, Graves Gilbert Clinic is now offering telehealth visits, which allows patients and physicians to use an app to communicate via video chat. Any patient who would like to schedule a telehealth appointment is encouraged to call their Graves Gilbert Clinic physician's office directly, or call the Graves Gilbert Clinic telehealth hotline at 270-746-5790.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. And again, thank you to Graves Gilbert Clinic for sponsoring this. As you all know, with events, we cannot do what we do without our sponsorships, and very much appreciate them. Wow. So this afternoon, again, we have our speaker, Dr. Terry Daniels, who is the president of FocalPoint Business Coaching. Terry has a passion for partnering with executives to grow their personal and professional brands, person to person. He has a proven track record of leading successful human resource teams, coaching leaders, building sustainable workplace cultures that produce exceptional business results. Terry works with clients to achieve success in areas such as leadership, management, productivity, decision-making, and plan execution. Terry has successfully been sought out as a mentor to executives in critical business positions. Terry, we appreciate you being here today very much, and I'm going to let you take the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Don, and thank you for allowing me to do this. Again, one of the things that I try to do is this is an area that is one of my focal points from my previous dissertation work is diversity and inclusion and leadership. So these kinds of conversations are, really good for me to have. But when working with organizations and certainly with the chamber, I offer this through the chamber, and it was well received, and we thought, let's see if we can offer it to our partners. And so that's good for me. I also work with the Chamber of Commerce as their VP of Human Resources as well. But this topic, defeating unconscious bias, and this training, the bulk of the training is going to be the video. So I'm gonna play the video at the outset, but our aim and our goal is to really talk about how do we defeat unconscious bias. And the reality is, and you'll hear that in the video, and we'll talk about it as well, is that all of us have some type of bias, but how do we defeat it so that it does not impede my ability to be successful? Organizations and leaders and individuals that are able to defeat unconscious biases, they are really the ones that are making the greatest impact and the difference in our communities. So how do we defeat those unconscious bias? And that really is the aim of this training that we'll do today. So I'm gonna play the video. Please watch it, and because we're gonna talk about it in detail on the other side. So here we go. And if it doesn't play well, let me know, and we'll see if we can do something different.
It's present in every workplace, but you can't see it. Sheila, it's getting in the way of making good management decisions, from hiring to promotions to team building. It's called unconscious bias, and this program will explore its role in the workplace and what you can do to defeat it.
My first interview went really well. This was just a formality. At least that's what I thought.
Can you tell me about a time when you solved a problem for a customer?
We were in the middle of a big computer change.
Joe always wants to hire the best candidate for each position.
So I spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth between corporate and our customers.
But he never hires anyone under 30.
Middle ground, and
Joe has a hidden bias and he doesn't realize it.
I just wish I knew if I said something wrong. Every step they said that I was a great fit. So this came out of the blue for me. I can't think of anything that I said that made him not follow through and hire me, but
we just want to make sure that we have enough resources for this expansion.
This is what I came here to prove, that
Beth wants her team to produce the best results.
this is the perfect time for the switching over, because
But when a team member doesn't speak proper English, she tunes out.
the clients have been asking for this.
Beth has a hidden bias too, but she doesn't know it.
We are ready. They are ready.
Connie,
Um,
thank you everyone for a great meeting and for your input. If you can put together a report for me.
I want to know about the timeline for the promotions that we've. So
Right. Well,
it's been a while, and
right.
I'm really interested in.
Well, frankly, we decided to go in a different direction.
I could have done things with this promotion and made a difference. This was my chance. I really thought I was in line for it.
You know, you're one of my best team members. I really value you.
This team leader prides himself on promoting from within.
But when a position requires travel, he doesn't even consider the woman who's a single mother, regardless of her qualifications. Does he have an unconscious bias?
I was really hurt. I worked really hard for this opportunity.
We just were looking for something a little bit different this time. So,
I like Jeff, and he always makes me feel like I'm part of his plan. But whenever there is a chance, he never chooses me. I think he only sees me as a mom and not a viable option for the work, whatever it takes.
For all we know, this manager may have made the right decision about whom to promote, but maybe not.
The big unanswered question is, why didn't he even consider the woman who's also a single mom?
What's going on here is not obvious. In fact, it's largely unseen and unintended. Good people with the best of intentions, making decisions and doing things that have a huge influence on their workplace, on productivity, on the lives of their colleagues, and most importantly, on themselves.
Hi, I'm Reagan.
I'm Armando.
And for the next few minutes, we want to speak with you about a topic that's been widely recognized, but rarely addressed in a practical way: unconscious bias. Generally speaking, a bias is an assumption, a belief or a prejudice about a category of people. When I say unconscious bias, I mean a bias that's in our blind spot, one that we're not even aware of.
great. Anything else you want to tell me about that job?
What if this is what's going on inside this manager's head without his even realizing it? What if, despite all his best intentions, he never gets past his unconscious bias? What we're attempting to show here is how unconscious the bias is for this manager. In the case we've been enacting, it means the manager won't consider people who are younger, preferring to hire older people.
Other managers might prefer to hire younger people, or might advance men instead of women with children.
Or a non-religious person over a religious person, and on and on. The implications of bias can be small or big, but in most cases, feelings are hurt, teams are damaged, and workplaces are adversely affected.
The organization misses out on people with a wider range of perspectives that could contribute to creativity and innovation.
My boss knew I always talked about Maya as the best on my team. When she asked why I didn't promote Maya, well, I had to think about that one. Why didn't I really consider her? Actually, I'm not sure.
Jeff's bias doesn't make him a bad person. Everyone has biases. They don't make us bad people, but they can cause problems and damage relationships. Take Maya, for example. Jeff's bias cost her a career opportunity, and his company lost out on her contributions. But if Jeff's bias is unconscious, I guess there's nothing he can do about it and no way he can control it. Well, fortunately, that's wrong.
There are many things in life we can't control, but luckily, bias is one of them. In fact, there's plenty we can do about our own personal bias.
Let's try something here. What are the first thoughts that come into your mind when I say a New Yorker,
A transgender woman,
a Muslim,
an immigrant from Mexico,
a woman who uses a wheelchair,
a multiracial man? It doesn't matter right now what you thought. The important thing is that you learn to become aware of your first thoughts. Watch your first thoughts. This is the first strategy in defeating unconscious bias.
Why? Because the first thought might be a clue to the existence of a bias. So rather than running on autopilot, I can pay attention to that first thought as it wafts up from my unconscious. This is how I can discover my bias.
Exactly. Of course, not all of our first thoughts are biases. How do you know which ones are? Here's a simple test you can use. When the first thought comes into your mind, ask yourself, would I feel the same way if the person was part of a different group? For example, you're in a meeting and a female executive is laying out her plans for a new project. As she continues, she's getting more and more animated, pacing up and down, making big gestures. She even pounds the podium to emphasize a point. What's your first thought about that? Is it, she's getting way too emotional? Now switch it around, and it's a man making the same presentation and pounding the podium in the same way. Do you still label him as way too emotional, or is he enthusiastic? Hint, if your answer is enthusiastic, you probably have a bias to work on. Monitoring your first thoughts is a way to become aware of a bias.
Now, once you've become aware of a bias, how can you defeat it? Use the power of logic. Logic is a weapon that's actually quite well designed to defeat our knee-jerk reactions to past experiences and environments that have been embedded in our unconscious. So what to do? Ask yourself, how many people do you actually know who conform to your bias? I don't mean a person crossing a parking lot or heard a rumor about or saw on television. I mean a person with whom you've actually spent enough time to know as an individual.
I'm sure that if you include all those individuals with whom you've already had a sustained and meaningful contact, you'll find that the number that conforms to your bias is very small.
Remember Joe, the manager who never hires anyone under 30 because his hidden bias tells him uncommitted, unreliable?
What if Joe had asked himself a simple question?
How many people under the age of 30 do I really know who are unreliable, uncommitted?
If Joe had asked himself this question, maybe it would have helped clear the way for him to see Sheila as a unique individual. Logic is a very powerful tool for defeating bias.
Unfortunately, unconscious bias has a nasty habit of popping up, usually when we're busy and rushing to make quick decisions. It's as if the pressure and stress causes your more evolved brain to shut down and your primitive bias brain to come to life. Even in these difficult, stressful situations, you're not powerless. Science offers a solution.
Hit the pause button. Stop. Take a beat. If you can pause for even just a few seconds, you have a chance to override your primitive brain and stop an unconscious bias from influencing your next words or actions.
This tiny shift, just a pause, could be the difference between a biased decision and seeing the situation or the person in front of you for who and what they really are.
We've already covered a lot of ground. Watch your first thoughts, use the power of logic, hit the pause button. Now the next strategy might surprise you. Act as if the bias doesn't exist.
Acting as if the bias doesn't exist is one of your most powerful anti-bias tools. To explain, let's go back to the manager who had a bias against people who aren't native English speakers.
I am ready. I have all the data.
I love to work with teams. I love to work with my team members. So when my colleague told me that I ignored Jorge in the meeting, I felt really embarrassed. And I admitted I wasn't listening. I stopped listening because of the way he speaks. You know, I've always been that way, and now I recognize that's a bias. And it was getting in the way of my ability to lead our team. So I decided to intentionally change my behaviors to counter my bias. So let's just go ahead and check in with each of the departments. What do you think? For 3 weeks, I asked each person who spoke at least one follow-up question. And then I took notes on what everybody said. That really forced me to listen and behave in a way that went against my bias. The more respectfully I treated people, the better they responded. And the more I got to know them for what they could offer our team. After sticking to these new behaviors for a while, I found that my bias began to fade. I know I have to stay vigilant, but I've made a good start. And I'm a better team leader.
Specific, concrete, measurable behaviors that run counter to your bias. This is a powerful tool. Why are these actions so important? Well, as Beth experienced, treating people in an unbiased way gets positive responses, and that immediately helps defeat bias.
But there's more to it than positive responses. Science actually shows us that if we behave in a way that's inconsistent with our bias, something has to give. Either the bias weakens or the behaviors stop. In Beth's case, her bias about how people speak couldn't stand up to her new set of behaviors.
I think sometimes we forget this and miss out on another strategy for defeating bias. Cultivate common ground. But I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that we stop valuing and encouraging diversity. What I am saying is that valuing differences and focusing on what we have in common are two compatible things.
Everybody has an identity of some sort, something that makes them distinctive. For example, here's a simple identity. Are you a dog lover or a cat lover? Distinct groups, different interests, challenges, and priorities. But these two groups have a lot in common. They're both animal lovers. So in reality, there aren't two groups, there are three. That third group is where the common ground is found.
Research has shown us that once we shift our focus to what we have in common with someone else, we are much more apt to see that person as a unique individual.
But how can you make this common ground happen? It may sound simple, but it does take a bit of courage.
A few suggestions. Reach out to people who are in some way different. Talk about things like music, family, and sports that you know. The subject doesn't matter, but the reaching out does.
You might be surprised at how much you have in common and how quickly your bias begins to fade away.
The desire to defeat unconscious bias is not enough. Desire is the driver, the rational mind is the tool. One without the other gets us nowhere.
Together, they can't be beat. By becoming aware of our unconscious biases, by using our thoughts to weaken them, and by behaving in ways that run counter to what our biases tell us, we truly can defeat them.
All righty, I'm gonna share. Can you see my screen, the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right, again, just want to talk about the content in that presentation. from the video. And really that covers all that we're going to talk about. But I want us to explore all of those thoughts just a little bit more. And as they gave us the definition, of bias is an inflexible conscious or unconscious belief about a particular category of people. Unconscious bias is our mental blind spot. We are unaware that it's there. And I've learned over time that there are a lot of things that are in our subconscious or unconscious that we can't do anything about until I bring it to a conscious level. So someone give me your thoughts on blind spots and how they limit you from being effective in your role. Anyone just want to open up mic and talk about blind spots and how they can affect your inabilities to be effective? Anyone? Blind spots, anyone? How do blind spots block you from being effective?
Well, my name's Delaire Rowe. I'm with an organization called Arts for All Kentucky, and we're an arts and disability organization. And I think the word you used, limitations, it limits the possibilities. It creates boundaries that are going to keep things, I suppose, the same. Instead of possibly opening up to some new possibilities.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Again, it just, that word limitations is a great word to bring up. I'm limited only because I put limits there or allow limits to stay there. So how do I press beyond that to make a difference, to make an impact, no matter what role I'm in, what organization I'm in? As video, we can have some level of bias, but I don't have to let that bias with me. But it may be a mental blind spot that I need to bring to my awareness, and that's really what the strength of defeating the unconscious bias requires. With the first strategy that gave us, watch your first thoughts. Watch your first thought when encountering someone different than yourself. Anyone want to share what example that the video gave us with respect to the first thought? What was the video clip that they gave us where someone was biased by their first thought? Let me ask you a different question. How many of y'all have, and maybe this is just me, when I work in a workplace from time to time and I see individuals that are sitting at their desk with headphones in their ears. And I'm thinking, wow, how can they be effective with headphones in their ears? And it typically is a generation that's not my generation. So how do I get beyond that first thought where I think that everyone that's listening with earbuds in their ears at the desk is ineffective? How do I get beyond that?
I'll give it a shot again. I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but sometimes just saying it, not in a mean way, but just say, well, I noticed you had earphones. I noticed you're listening to music. And you could even just say, what are you listening to? And start a conversation that way.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Again, that's a great point. I mean, how do I just start the conversation? Because I've never tried to work at my computer, do work with earbuds in. I'm not effective, but maybe that's me. That may not be true of all people. And I don't know that someone's ineffective just because they have earbuds in. But if my first thought is a biased thought that individuals that have earbuds in, they can't be effective. How do I know that? And so I need to figure out how to get past that. And the example in the video where the hiring manager noticed a young lady and he doesn't hire people under 30. What could be his bias of hiring people under 30? Any thoughts there? Anyone?
You could be not allowing your company to have some of the newest ideas and innovations, by not hiring younger people.
Do you think that stops us from generating
Growth.
ideas?
Generating what, Dr. Daniels?
New ideas or new
Yes.
things?
Yes, I think it does.
Yeah, so again, the video clip is saying watch our first thoughts, because everyone under 30 is not ineffective, or everyone that has earbuds in their ears are not ineffective. So one of the strategies that we can employ is to make sure that I watch my first thought when I see something, because that may show that I have a bias. That was the first thought. Anyone have any other thoughts on the first strategy?
Another way, when you were saying how can you get around that bias about the earbuds, if you're not comfortable striking up a conversation with that individual, then also maybe there's someone else in other areas of your life that you have a stronger bond with that you may think may be in the, the age range or whatever of that individual, and you could ask them, hey, do you normally use earbuds? And they may tell you that, hey, it drowns out sound, or man, I have to have something playing or something going on to concentrate. And then you can, kind of use that to see if maybe that the person at your work has that same situation.
Absolutely. That's a good way to look at how do I ask someone else that I may know in a closer setting to give me their perspective, because I have a bias when I see it, but it may not be an accurate assessment. The second strategy was use the power of logic, a tool that can use to weaken even our most unconscious bias. Logic. What was the question that the individual asked with respect to logic? Anybody remember the question regarding the how many do I actually know? That's a logical question. How have you tried to use logic when you're facing bias in the workplace? Because biases block us. How do we use logic to make sure that it doesn't stop me from achieving my goals? Has anybody ever tried to use logic to overcome biases?
Yes, I have. This is Dawn.
Okay.
I have logically gone, okay, this is what I'm thinking, but is this really true? Is what I'm thinking, they can't meet the expectation because what I'm seeing, and I've created this bias in my head about it, and kind of just personally overcoming that and reasoning with myself to overcome that logic that's not true.
Absolutely. You have to start asking questions of yourself. I mean, that's a good point, Don. You have to ask questions of yourself, because if I'm leading, I have to keep leading, and I can't let things stop me because it doesn't add up or doesn't make sense. Bias is a very real challenge for every one of us, and it can stop us in our tracks from moving forward or making a difference or making an impact or moving the needle in an individual or an organization. But logic is a great strategy that helps me get beyond that. Any other thoughts on that
one? This is Delaire again, and one thing that came to my mind is just the opposite of logic. If I have an emotional response to something, that's when I have to ask myself, what is this about? And sometimes spotting the emotion, the feeling, is kind of a cue for me to question my thoughts.
Sure. The thing about it is, and that's a great point, emotion tends to be the driver for a lot of bias. And that shows up in the workplace. When I take a position it may be out of an emotional trench that I allow myself to get in. How do I ask the logical questions, as you said, is this real or is this something that is driving me? What do I do about it? This is a strategy that no matter what role we're in or what position we have, if you ask the right questions, you can move beyond a bias. So we want to defeat the unconscious bias, but we do that by using logic as our second strategy. Ask yourself if the source of the bias was reliable. That's a good, ask yourself if the source of the bias was reliable. It's not to say anything that has been taught me, given me over time is right, wrong, or indifference. But as I am in a position to make a difference or to make a decision or lead an individual or lead an organization, I need to look at logic so that I am making the right decision, not by a previous source. If the source was accurate and reliable, great, but I need to move the ball down the field. Strategy number 3, hit the pause button. Give logical mind a chance to take over. Sometimes I think there was a strategy somewhere that someone brought, count to 10 before you make a decision. Has anybody ever had to count to 10 or do something, go out and take a walk before you found yourself really emotionally entrenched in a battle? Does hitting the pause button really help? Anyone? Or whenever you tried it? When have you tried to count to 10 or take a walk and get yourself mentally focused again? Anyone? No one's ever had a chance where they got caught up in a moment and they couldn't think logically, or they couldn't be rational, or they just sort of stayed in the storm of the mind and didn't know how to get out of it? How do you get out of that?
Carrie, I think this is good to Delaire's point about emotion. I find myself hitting the pause button when I feel more emotional and making sure I'm thinking logically as opposed to going with my emotions. That's when I tend to hit the pause button.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen before, that, it happens in the workplace. Someone's angry, somebody's not doing right, somebody's not saying the right words, and it hits something deep inside of us that makes me go to this biased position. And now I'm caught up in the emotion of it. How do I back up? How do I back up and really allow my logical mind to have a chance to take over? Hit the pause button is a strategy that can be employed anytime, anywhere, anytime, so that we can make sure that we're moving the ball down the field. So that's a great strategy. I challenge you to watch this one, because this one is one that works. Strategy number 4, act as if the bias doesn't exist. Act as if the bias doesn't exist. What do you think about the lady that she was speaking to her team, but the one that was of English as a second language? Have you seen that before? And how do you manage when you don't understand the language or their clarity is not there? How do you get beyond that? And what does she do to get beyond that? Anyone? What did she do when she found that she was speaking over him?
Well, I liked her idea of listening and taking notes. I thought that was a really great idea.
Anyone else?
I thought, like you said, I thought that was a great idea because it did more, and I liked how didn't she ask something from each one of them? Because it forced herself to spend, whatever time listening more to that person, and it helps on both ends. It's helping her overcome this unconscious bias, and then it's helping that individual because I'm sure that he could tell that she wasn't giving him undivided attention in the beginning, but by hearing something from each one of them, it gave him those few moments of knowing that she was paying attention and being focused.
Absolutely. I think you're right that she asked each person an individual question just to make sure she challenged herself. Because if I have a bias, I may just skip over someone really quick as though it never happened. We've seen that in the workplace, and it just really breaks down that camaraderie, that effectiveness, that oneness of mind. And so I act as if the bias doesn't exist by asking the questions of everyone in the room. That was a good strategy that she employed. Erin, any questions coming up? I know I'm seeing some show up. Any questions that I need to answer?
So far, no questions. We have several comments. Pausing is generally a good practice. With big decisions, yes, just to take a breather, to step away from the situation. And then also changing a physical habit of writing notes on what each said and physically breaking the barrier.
Yeah, that is good. Again, I think those are the right things. And if we're going to defeat unconscious bias, again, remember, everyone has the bias, one or another. Sometimes when I do this session in person, I'll ask everyone to stand up, sit down, and I'll just throw out a few words. And so what I'll try here, if you look at your button and you can put a thumbs up or whatever. If you like Chinese, put a thumbs up real quick. Chinese food. What about, so notice everybody on your screen that likes and those that don't. Okay, if you like Mexican food, put a thumbs up. Bowling Green Chamber likes everything, I can tell you that. So if you like to go horseback riding, thumbs up. Nobody? What if you like riding roller coasters? Thumbs up. And I do that just to show that no two people are of the same mindset in every area. We are all different and we all have biases and we all are unique. How do I not let that stop me from achieving what I set out to achieve when I started this job or took this role or took this position or lead this organization or lead this team? We're unique and everybody brings those unique things to the table. How do I not let them get in the way of achieving that which I set out to achieve? Act as if the bias doesn't exist. You do that by asking questions of everyone. If you want equality, act as if you already have it. William James. The fifth strategy, defeat bias by cultivating common ground. What did they do to cultivate common ground? Anyone? What can you do to cultivate common ground in your workplace? What would you do to cultivate common ground in the workplace? And when you see it where no one is working on common ground, how do you deal with that? Anyone? Cultivate common ground. I'm gonna go to the chat and see what's in.
I would say maybe like working on something or talking about something where the goals are already preset maybe for everyone. For example, if we have a particular, like right now we have something that's the product of the month. So even if there's things that we don't agree on, maybe I would be talking about the product of the month and what we need to do to get, to get this product sold or whatever, just because that's something that's already set up for us to agree upon.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
And then try to stay in areas that I know that we think alike and get those, you know, and then go from there, move into things that are different in our thought patterns.
I think you're right. I think you got to identify something that you agree on. And I'm sure there's some UK basketball fans on here. I'm sure there's some WKU fans on here. The common ground, either a cat lover or dog lover. But guess what? Both of us are animal lovers, right? So I'm a UK fan, a WKU fan, a U of L fan. But guess what? We all like sports. So finding that common ground in the workplace can defeat unconscious bias. And so, like what you just said, Monica, what are we doing for this month? That makes a difference. So how do I keep doing that? So the key is to never settle for the unconscious bias to drive activity or behavior or outcomes, because it can impede our progress. The one thing that I like to share all the time is be intentional about achieving what you set out to achieve. Don't settle. If someone has a bias, ask the next level question. You know, look at logic. Is that everyone? Not in a combative way, because sometimes this topic can be a emotion-driven topic. But when we look at it from the standpoint of defeating unconscious bias, it's not about emotion. It's not about a bias, a race, gender, any of that, political positions. It really is about making sure that I'm focused on achieving our set objectives. So you can do that by cultivating that common ground. What's the organizational goals? What are the team goals? What are you trying to achieve? Those questions we keep asking over and over again. Any other thoughts on this one? In minor ways, we differ. In major, we're the same. Maya Angelou. So the thing is that we are different in so many ways, but minor. But in major ways, we're the same. We all want to win. We all want to be successful. How do we do that consistently over time? Any questions at this point? I want to offer the opportunity for any questions on how do you deal with diversity and inclusion in the workplace? How do you handle difficult conversations in the workplace? What questions do you have?
Question.
Terry.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, questions could be submitted via chat. However, everyone's been doing a good job of not speaking over one another. So if you guys want to just feel free to ask those, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I guess, Terry, my big question would be for those that, I mean, this unconscious bias is something, as you said, all of us do it. And it's a very good thing to have it be top of mind to think about and how we're addressing it. Taking it a step further, as you're helping your staff, and if you're looking at the diversity, equity, and inclusion components, how would you, or what would you recommend as resources or ways to start those conversations with your staff, and why it's so important?
That's a great question, Don. I think the first word, and I used the word earlier, is being intentional. And so what I would do is, how do you first start the conversation? So I would look for something just to generate the conversation, because it really can be uncomfortable because people think you're challenging their value system and how they were raised. Or when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not a conversation about values or how I was raised. It's about workplace. So finding some way to introduce the conversation, to talk about it as a non-emotional topic, but make it very practical So do you have just a baseline discussion about defeating unconscious bias? How do we do that? That would be the first thing I would do, is find a way to get the topic up front in a non-emotional way. And
Some
just
resources.
Resources, I've got, WKU has a great resource in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion council. I'm a part of that, and we have great resources. There's some that we will post in my website on diversity and inclusion. That's where I would start, is WKU. They're very focused in this area right now.
Okay. And I'm kind of curious, we've got just a few more minutes, but for folks that are on the call, what have you been using, or have you been addressing any of these issues at all yet? And if you are, what's been working?
What I have been doing, Don, is this presentation here. And I think the reason why this presentation is one of those comfortable spots is that it allows the conversation to be raised early. There's a young group of fraternity at the University of Louisville that I've done this workshop with, and I've got to go do it again with them, because it's comfortable for them to have the conversation, and most people just struggle with bringing the conversation up. Mm-hmm. So this is what I've used as a starting point, and then I customize beyond that for more in-depth diversity and inclusion conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Any online or in the chat box?
We do not have any in the chat box yet.
Well, Don and Aaron, thank you for allowing me to share this. And I'll give you more information that we can post on the website from this, the 5 strategies. That way they can be posted on the website so that everyone can look at them later on.
Awesome. And we just had a comment come in. It says, I try to treat people as I want to be treated. And I think that's definitely a great way to live. And Terry, thank you so much for this presentation. And for those of you that participated, thank you for being here, taking the time out today. This has been recorded, and it will be on our website under the Business at its Best recording. So you are welcome to review this, share this with others on your staff. And please let us know if you ever have ideas or suggestions for other topics similar to this, or any topic that could be helpful in training. Please let us know that too. And again, Terry, thank you for your time. And Graves Gilbert Clinic, thank you for your sponsorship. And I hope you all have a fabulous day.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.